Hello, everybody, and welcome to the book launch for Times Ellipse. I'm Frasier Armitage, the writer of the book, sci-fi fan, part-time robot, full-time nerd, and joining me today is a really good friend and a really amazing writer. She's just awesome at everything. She's Ai Jiang, Nebula Award nominated writer of amazing stories. Hi, Ai, how are you doing?
Good. I am so excited to be here to celebrate this amazing book with you. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling crazy is how I'm feeling. It's like there's the good nerves and then there's all the evil nerves underneath it. So it's like it's all manner of nerves, but it'll be great. It'll be fun. Um and yeah, and for everybody who's joining us live, hello to you as well. And feel free to type out anything in the comments if you've got any questions for me and I. Just go for it. But thank you for joining us, and thank you for being here. So yeah, we're here because of Times Ellipse, which is it's. I hope that the virtual background doesn't. Oh no, yeah. If I put it in front of my face, we're
Oh,
okay. No, there we go. So
ah,
that's the book. So yeah, so that's Times Ellipse. So you may have noticed that the cover is behind us. We're not really small on the
yes.
front of a book. We did it as a background, but yeah. So yeah, so that's what we're here about. It's my second
Yeah.
book. And I has hey Davini, in the
Woo.
comments giving us lots of party things. I want the emojis. That's what they're called. If I lose words tonight, it's all them nerves is what it is. Um, but yeah, so my second book, and I read an early copy, and hey Steve, good to see you. Um, and you're on the back of the book. You're just here. Your print's just here,
Oh,
which is awesome.
yeah.
Yeah. Um.
It was an
So yeah, so that's
absolute
really really
pleasure.
cool. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad that that's the case and that it wasn't an absolute pain. I mean, can you imagine? Like,
No,
it's like
no,
let's
absolutely
let's come
not.
talk about the book release and have you there, like,
No, it
yeah.
was amazing. It
Um.
was absolutely wild.
Thank you. And it's so cool. I love that I enjoyed it so much because I'm such a fan of yours. I it's like if anybody is here and hasn't read any of I's stuff, you need to like do it straight away. It's amazing. Yeah, I love I's storytelling. So the fact that you liked it just means a great deal. So thank you. Um, should I tell people what it's about? Do you think is that a good?
Yes. My first
Hey,
question was
it's
actually
David.
going to
It's hi,
be,
David.
oh,
No,
I
no,
think we
sorry.
have a
People in
bit
the
of
chat.
a,
If I'm sorry, I
oh,
keep
no,
going, keep
no.
going.
No,
It's all
no,
good. I
no,
just
no, you're good. I think we
oh,
have like a few seconds delay. So we're going to have to try to time this.
yeah. We had this last time. So I've interviewed I on the for the YouTube channel for FanFiAddict, and we had it last time where there was like a delay, and it was like, yeah, it was fun, but we can. It's all good. We've done it once before. We can do it again, right? We can manage the delay. It's all
Yes.
good.
Yes, I believe. But yes, so
So
my
what was
first question was
so
actually
what was
going to, oh no. Wait, I'm going to get it out real fast. Don't talk yet. One line pitch for Times Eclipse.
well, one line pitch. Yeah.
Yes.
See, we're total pros at this. Total pros, aren't we? It's amazing. So yeah, my one line pitch is um astronauts going into space, and what they find is themselves with timey wimey things going on. I guess. Like, is that? Yeah, I should have worked on a better pitch. It's kind of like Interstellar meets The Martian Chronicles. It's like it's got lots of craziness about it. So yeah. Oh, I should read the back of the book because that'll tell people
Yes, do
what it's
it.
about, right?
Do it.
Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna give my best like movie voice. So this is like the trailer voice, like, no solution saves everyone, only one keeps us human. Dun, dun, dun. The hope of a dying Earth rests on a crew of astronauts. Their mission, find a new home. But when they touch down on a distant planet, a time-bending anomaly traps them in a situation that no one could have predicted, causing them to question the nature of humanity, the snare of destiny, and the shape of time itself. Times Ellipse spans generations, orbiting the lives of the scientists and astronauts involved in this historic mission as they discover that escaping the planet is simpler than evading its legacy.
Yes.
I really liked when I wrote the
Deal.
sentence, the shape of time itself. I was like, ooh, that's a good sentence. I'll keep that one. It was good.
That will be one of my later questions coming. But my first question for you actually is, what was your inspiration for this book?
Oh, that's a great question, yeah, I really wish I'd spent more time today thinking about answers to some of the questions you might ask, because that's a really good one. So the inspiration for the book, I wrote this book in like 3 weeks. I drafted it in like a super short period of time. And then I was editing it for like 5 years. So I feel like the original inspiration is like, it's so long ago that it's like, it's hard to remember what the initial spark was, but it was probably something to do with discoveries that were made in like 2017. So like at the time there were things like gravitational waves were being like detected like for the first time ever, and people were like, wow, that's cool. And like they found the TRAPPIST 1 like exoplanet star system, and I remember like at the time just being so inspired by all these discoveries that I was like just writing down loads of ideas for stories, and then with the idea of sort of like, you know, coming back to them at a later time. And I think the original sort of idea came as like one of those, and then I decided to try them out as flash fiction. So I wrote a flash story, showed it to a really good friend, and then they said, this should be longer, you should try writing more. So then I wrote like another flash fiction piece and was like, oh, there's still more to explore here. Sat down and just wrote the novel in like 3 weeks. So, but it could have been a very different book if I'd gone with like a different idea from those initial sort of things. Because I had like loads of weird, crazy ideas when back in 2017 when those exoplanets were found. But that's what happens, isn't it? Like science discovers something and we get ideas from it, and that's how sci-fi writers work. So yeah, I guess it was that.
What I'm hearing is there will be potentially a book 2 where all those other ideas didn't make it through.
Yeah, who knows what there will be. It's like, it's crazy. Yeah. But yeah, if you want a book 2, I'll do you one. It's fine, it's all good, I can write you one.
I think we all want a book 2, so you know, hint hint, nudge nudge. But yeah, it's very interesting that you were talking about like this discovery of different scientific things. And one of the questions I had about it, especially in the book, it's kind of like the responsibility of science and the guilt of creation, and what your thoughts on it, just in general, but also in relation to the book.
Ooh, that's really good. Yeah, so the responsibility of science, I think that science is responsible for good and bad. You know, it's when you look back through scientific discovery, usually when something is discovered, it's great that we learn, but then it's usually used in destructive as well as creative ways. And it's so there. I think the responsibility of science is for us to keep on learning, but the responsibility for what we choose to use that science for is a whole other issue that I think I just think that us as humans, like we sometimes lack the tools to be able to like use what we learn in the best way possible, because we succumb to our own impulses way too quickly sometimes to properly think it through. But I think that the but science and the role of the responsibility of science is to reveal to us, like, yeah, just truths about the universe, because truth is like an amazing thing to think about, that there are truths to be discovered. So yeah, that's, to me, is the responsibility of science. But yeah, the guilt of creation, oh man, that's such a good theme to like dig into. It's like, because yeah, I guess we're creators, right? So we create and we write and we, you know, come up with characters and all this kind of stuff. And as a writer, you kind of like, you're constantly creating. We're creative people. And sometimes you write a story and you think, yeah, this is good, this is great, I've nailed it, I've smashed it. And then sometimes you write a story and you think, oh no, I could have written that better, I need to write this better, it's not good, it's like all that kind of thing. And I guess again, it's like there's a subjectivity about how you feel about creation, and the creative process. Like sometimes you're really happy with it and sometimes you feel really bad about it. And I guess guilt kind of comes in when, if you create something that is used like in a way that is contrary to how you intend it, then I guess you would feel guilty about creating it in the first place. But I guess for me as a creator, I look at the original intention of it and I look at that and say, right, okay, what was the purpose of it? Have I achieved it? And that's how I measure its success or not. So yeah, I guess, and again, you kind of got to separate a little bit, like the creator from the creation a little bit. But yeah, it's interesting. What's your take on it? I want to hear from you about it, because you've got such a good question.
I like you were talking about science as like using it irresponsibly, or sometimes using it as like a destructive force. And it really made me think about a conversation I had with my sister previously, because she is working in the oil industry, like as part of her studies, but she is doing like chemical engineering. So she wants to do environmentally friendly things, but first she has to feed herself, and that's why she's working in the oil industry at the moment. But she's working, yeah, but she's working in like the environmental sector of this oil company, which I should not name because I don't know how much I should talk about it anyways. But basically, they have different departments where some departments are like specifically working on efficiency of production, right? So they will make like machinery and things like that that do things very efficiently but might be very detrimental to the environment. And then her job would be kind of like to offset that or fix it. And then it's just like an endless cycle of like breaking and fixing. And I feel like a lot of the times with science, it's kind of like that. We make a bunch of things with like, good intentions, and then we realize all the unintended consequences, or maybe we already know the consequences that come with it, and we have to later fix.
Yeah, and that really ties into like what maybe some of the book explores as well, is that there's definitely like unintended consequences that result from like what they try and achieve through the book, and it's what level of responsibility you put on the shoulders of those who conceive this mission that they go on. Is it who's responsible for the people that are then involved later on down the line? And it's a really, yeah, there's things like that the book kind of touches on. But yeah, and I think as well, like a lot of the book's themes kind of like goes into like themes of parenthood a lot. And I think as parents, you kind of feel a level of responsibility over the life that you've helped to create. And I think that's a really there's themes that mirror like there are, so these kinds of themes that we talk about, like this massive level of like, like, this is like the role of science, but then there's, you can boil it down to like a very personal thing and say, right, okay, in terms of like what we create and what we discover, as parents, that's something else that the book kind of tackles too, and explores like, what is our role as parents, what are we responsible for, and what are others responsible for. It's really, it goes deep. To say it's a short book, it goes pretty deep into those kinds of things. And I was quite pleased when I wrote it, because I was like, ooh, this is interesting. It's like it kept me going. So yeah.
One thing that I actually wanted to ask about, because you brought up Parenthood, and it really fascinated me too, is if you could like speak a little more about kind of like the way this discovery has changed parenthood, especially because, without giving too much away, the way that parents outlive their children in this case. And I want you to talk a little bit more about that, because that was fascinating when I read about it.
Yeah. So I wrote this before I became a parent, and then only felt like I'd really understood what it was about after I became a parent. So it was like I was writing it and sort of trying to discover sort of all these different things, and it was fun, you know. And but when I read it back, sort of like a couple of years after I'd written it, after having my little one, and just like over some things I was like, wow, that was quite profound how accurate that was. And then in other things I was like, wow, that was quite profound in how inaccurate it was. It was like, it was just crazy how all of the things like that you discover when you're a parent change your perspective over so many things. And so the editing process was really good, because I kind of got to see growth in a way, which was nice, which in terms of the story and the book, this anomaly that is on this exoplanet that they unwittingly discover. Let me put this comment from Stephen up. There you go. Hey Steve. Yeah, go give your little one a hug. Yeah, awesome. But yeah, so in terms of like the story, so they encounter this anomaly, and then something happens which then changes the usual relationship between parents and children due to this anomaly. And so it kind of like is a chance to explore childhood in a different way, and also parenthood in a different way. And becoming a parent, you have all of these fears, and you have all of these insecurities, you know, about, you know, what you can do for your children, what you can leave for your children, you know, all of these kinds of things. And what the book kind of does is it kind of throws all of that out of the window, because it kind of says like, look, you guys are going to be here for a while, you know, so you're going to have plenty of time. You're not going to have to worry about that. And it's kind of like looking at parenthood without that aspect to it, without that aspect of like, you know, of taking age out of the equation. So that to me was a really fascinating thing to think about in light of all of the different things that I discovered from being a parent. So it enabled me to kind of like just approach it with a different lens to the one I was living with, and that was really fun to do. That was really, really good to write with, and it was just fun.
It was very cool. I feel like, especially with the extended timelines of the parents, which I won't talk too much about, but one question I had was, because of the way that life has been extended for humans going to Trapias, like there was kind of a deifying of these humans. So what my question basically is, in kind of creating that new religion, because we see kind of how civilization has evolved and almost repeated in a way that kind of reflects our past, if that makes sense. So I was wondering about your process of creating the religion in the book.
Yeah, so that was really fun to do, because that wasn't intended when I started writing the book. That just kind of happened by accident. That was like it was one of those things where I hit a point in the book, and I was thinking, like, what would it be like if you know, when you think back to sort of like all of these stories of, sort of godlike beings that could live like for thousands of years and all this kind of stuff, and you look at mythology, they're viewed a certain way by the people. So like you had the Greeks that viewed like their superheroes like in that way. You had like, you know, the Romans did the same. In fact, like you look at every culture has something like that, where they look at you know, these like mythological figures as, and they look up to them as heroes and people that they try and emulate. And I thought if you've got a brand new planet, the people that would bring that with them would be the people who would go and colonize that planet. And then, you know, why not, what, you know, what effect would that be if to the people that then, you know, to the colony. And that's kind of like how my thinking started with that, just because I was trying to create a culture on the planet, and I realized that like every culture kind of gravitates around that. And because there's so many cyclical things about the book, like the structure of it and the story, like everything about it works in spirals. So yeah, because of that, I was like, yeah, I thought that would be a really cool thing to circle around as well. So yeah, that was kind of like a very happy accident. But yeah, I'm really glad you liked it though, because I was really not sure about it when I wrote it the first time, and I was reading it back. I was like, oh man, where did this even come from? Why is it even here? It's like, so I'm really glad it worked.
I feel like whenever we are world building, there are always these like very unique and interesting, but almost odd tidbits that kind of appear in our work. But I feel like those are what makes our work most unique and interesting, if that makes sense to the readers. Like the twists that don't really come expected to the writers are also very unexpected in a good way, I would say, especially in terms of your book, to the readers. So one of my questions to kind of like lead into that would be like if you could talk a little more about the intersection between bending time and the shape of it, as a whole, as well as the way it impacts memory and history in the book.
You've got such good questions. It's like, yeah, I love it. I love it. Yeah. Wow, what a question. So the how bending time intersects with all of these different things. Yeah. So I guess the thing with with Times Ellipse is that I think my one of the first things that I concluded before I'd written the book is something that I'd written in another book. So like my writing journey, I started out by writing these books and they were absolutely terrible, but some of them, some things kind of like hung over from them. So when I started writing other books, I was like, maybe I can use this theme, or maybe I can explore this theme a bit more, because I enjoyed doing that with this other thing that I can never release and use. So I might as well try it in a different way. And one of the things that I'd written in this other story was about history being a circle, and like past and present and future, and how they all kind of intersect. And that is kind of like the shape of time. Every moment is filled with past, present, and future. And you know, there is definitely a circular. I know we look at it as like a triangle sometimes, but I see it more as a circle. You know, that we're constantly just living in these loops, and that are built from what is behind us and what is coming, what we perceive to be ahead of us and what is now, you know. And this, it's where those points intersect that I think that we have this freedom of choice and freedom of discovery and all these different things. And I think that what's really, really cool about time bending fiction is that it lets you explore that aspect of things, and so it lets you explore like the intersection point, and it lets you sort of unravel that a little bit, because it's kind of like all jumbled together, right? Like we are the sum of our experiences, but we're also the sum of our potential, and it's like it lets you sort of separate those things in a way that other subgenres of sci-fi don't. So anything that bends time, I'm fascinated by it, because I've just got this little obsession almost with like how time shapes our identities and who we are. And so I really wanted to explore that, but tie it in with this idea of these cycles that we see present through history. And you know, we circle the sun, you know, that's how we measure a year. And you know, time itself is a cycle. So it's like it's just a really interesting thing to for me to sort of delve into, because that point of intersection is something that I think the book is trying to reach. So yeah, so with the mechanics of the time bending, that was something that was that is, it's not real science. It's like, it could never it's absolutely ludicrous to think that the science of the book could be real science. It's all, yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, but I didn't want to dwell too much on the science aspects of it, but more along like the human aspect of it. So yeah. What about, how do you feel about like time bending fiction? Is it something that you enjoy?
I feel like it depends on the type of time bending fiction. If it, like, I am very, like, it's very hard for me to read very hard science fiction, if that makes sense. So I'm very much drawn to more philosophical science fiction, which Times Ellipse is. And when you were talking about the concept of time and the way that past, present, and future kind of jumbled together, it reminded me of another sci-fi piece I really loved, which was The Story of Your Life, by Ted Chiang. Yes, and I feel like with your characters specifically, because they're in like this situation where it's almost like they do know the past, present, and future, but in the case that they are the ones creating the future, right? But they can see the present through their own children, and then they can see the past through what humanity is like, very far away. So I feel like it's very cool to explore this concept in the way that it kind of influences our culture, our civilization, like the human psyche and our relationships, rather than the very hardcore science of it all, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm so glad you got that from it. That's awesome. And I'm so complimented by you saying about, like, because Ted Chiang's book is like, there's that story in that set of short stories that it was just, yeah, it's amazing. It's no wonder the Arrival turned out so good. It's like, yeah, it's such a good story. So yeah, to get anywhere near to even the depth of something like that would be a huge compliment. So thank you so much for just mentioning it. That's amazing. It makes me feel so happy.
So my next question for you is actually because you wrote another book, Rememory. So I was wondering if you found that you were exploring like similar themes in the two books, or if like one played off the other when you were writing it.
Ooh, yeah. So yeah, Rememory, that one is a novelette where memory is currency. So it's this future where you can spend your memories, and in order to get by, and some guy has his memories stolen, so he like plans a heist to get them back. So the thing about that is, again, like, a lot of that was tied into what, are we what we remember, or are we what we forget? And I think that a lot of it, a lot of the stories that I write kind of tie into this. The theme that carries through it is like what makes us us. Because I feel like that is it's a concept that really fascinates me, and it's something that I think speculative fiction does really well. Because it kind of shines a mirror up to, to getting underneath the skin, which is it's a really cool thing to be able to do. But it kind of just explores like that whole thing of, you know, who are we as people in the nitty gritty of it? What separates us from everything else? And it's a really cool thing. I mean, we're the only creatures, on this planet that think and reason and form these kinds of choices based on memory, without the influence of instinct, being the primary driving factor. We have the ability to choose, which is fascinating. And just like, why would you not write stories that explore that? It's like, yeah. So for me, I think that's where the crossover between the two of them lies. Like, one of them is very much like a cyberpunk thriller, and one of them is very much like a colony, like speculative, contemplative, you know, I guess character studies book ish thing. Space opera, that's the word I'm looking for. But it's like, but yeah, so they're very different in style and in tone, but they both have the same kind of heart to them, which is kind of like looking inward as opposed to outward. And I think that speculative fiction is so exciting because it does that, and that's something that I love about your books, is that they do the same kind of thing. They make you question what's inward, rather than sort of, you don't read an Ai Jiang book and then question the world. You question your place in it, and I think that's a really, really powerful sort of storytelling thing to do. So those are the kind of stories I want to write, because I'm just a huge fan of them. So yeah.
It's interesting how you were talking about memory, and whether it's like our experiences that make who we are, and like it's the things that we forget is what makes us who we are. And I was thinking a lot about the way that we write stories and how we kind of infuse character emotional history into them, and then kind of shapes their choices and decisions later on, and their thoughts and perceptions about various things, right? And the judgments they make. And then so it also brings me to kind of nature versus nurture, right? And if we are a certain way by nature, or is it because of the nurturing from our parents or mentors or otherwise by society that kind of makes us who we are? And one thing I was really thinking about recently was like, if I was brought up in like a very different household, things like that, right? I would be a very different person, even if my DNA and genes and things like that were very similar, right? And I saw a question in the audience that kind of relates to this. So I'm gonna read it out from, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. Stephanie.
Well,
So
should we
in
put it on
relation,
let's put it on the screen
oh
as well.
yeah, yeah,
Let's
yeah.
put it
You
on the
can
screen.
put the yeah. So in relation
Hang
to
on.
starting the
Yeah,
story before being
there
a
we go.
parent and then working on it as a new parent, did you experience discovering new fears through your own writing?
The short answer to that question is yes. The longer answer to that question is, I think that when we write, we're writing. Sometimes we're writing because of our fears, and we're needing to get some kind of understanding over why we're afraid of certain things, and so writing is a really interesting form of discovery for a writer to go through. And I don't know if you experience this, I as well, and I don't with Defini as well. If you write, you might experience this as well, too. Um, that, when you write something, you may not understand why you've written it until after, and then you read it back, and then you think, oh, okay, yeah, this is what this story is about. And it's kind of revealing a little aspect of you. It's kind of like your brain translating things into a safe way for you to understand them. And I kind of feel like that's what writing does for writers. Is it's kind of like a way of understanding a little bit more about the writer themselves, which is one of the beautiful things about writing, is it's you constantly discovering. So whenever you're writing something, you're discovering new fears, and you're discovering new loves, and you're discovering new everythings, and it's really, really cool that happens. But in terms of the actual fears this time around, then yeah, an awful lot of it was the fear of um, bestowing my mistakes upon my my little one, because like there's very much this theme in the book about sort of the yeah, sort of the people who are influenced sort of taking up the mantle and then running with it more. And I think, yeah, one of the big fears that you have as a parent is you try your best not to mess your child up, but you know that on some level it's inevitable and it's going to happen. But yeah, for me it was like, I don't want him to um to be in the same kind of situations I've been in, because of something that I've given him, or that I've bestowed upon him. And that was a big, big fear of like, how do I break that cycle? How do I just let him be him, and not sort of send him on a path that is one that I've walked, not in the best way. So that was like a really crazy kind of fear that I didn't realize I had until I was writing the book, well, until I was editing the book, and then I was like, oh no, it was maybe I'm gonna maybe I know already how I'm gonna mess him up, but no, it was just like, I think every parent kind of has that sort of fear on some level, you know, that you don't want your child to make the same kind of mistakes that you did. So yeah, that was the biggest one that I think came from writing it. But that's a really good question. Oh, hey, Raph. Raph Saunders.
Yeah.
What do you find that when you're writing about discovery, that it's like you'll write something and then think, oh yeah, of course that's how things are?
I feel like that, especially when I am writing sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. I remember someone asking me this question before. They were like, what can you do in sci-fi, fantasy, and horror that you cannot do with realist fiction, right? And something I've been thinking about is the way that with sci-fi, fantasy, and horror, it gives you more liberty to explore in a way, I think, to make different things more of a metaphor rather than its literal thing, you know, like places, kind of little shifts in cultures, architecture, even symbols, or people as concepts. Um, but I feel like almost all of the times I'll write something, and then when I think back to it, I'll think, oh, this is how it connects to my life, or this specific concept I've been exploring, and it's something I've never realized about myself, or maybe the people around me, if they hold parts of, you know, like my family or my friends or even society as a whole. And then I find myself moving on to my next project with that in mind and kind of like exploring more deeply. But no matter how deeply I explore it, after the project, I'll look back again and I'll be like, oh, and then there's this thing. Well, now I got to explore it in another way, in another work in progress, or things like that.
It's so true that like one project feeds another, and it's a constant, I guess it is like a constant growth. It's like, but you kind of see those across projects, don't you? You kind of, you write something and then you write another project and then another project, and then when you look back across all of them, you think, oh yeah, that's I've gone from there and I've come to here. And it's like, yeah, what was really cool about the process of this one is because I was editing it for such a long time, I got to see that all within the same project, which is not, it's not something you normally get, because normally you finish a project and then move on to the next. So with this one, because it just took so long, it was really, really cool to see growth through it, which is not the norm for me. But you're totally right that like, because what you think in one thing, it can change from like however many sort of like down the line. It's great. Yeah.
Sure. That
Oh, I
kind of
totally
leads
agree with
me.
Raph about I Am I as well. It was so good.
Ah, thank you. But this actually leads me to my next question, which is about writing your book too. So it's like, what was your favorite part of Time Ellipse, or like the favorite part of your process writing it, and what was the hardest part?
Oh, that's a good question. So favorite part, probably probably writing Kirk's character. Um so yeah, that was he was a very fun character to write, because I learned so much from this book about how to write as different characters,
Mhm.
because the book is, the structure of it is kind of like almost like short stories strung together in like a single narrative, but it's all from different perspectives in first person. And so I had to find ways of making these characters different and unique, and imagining them in sort of talking about other characters, and then all of a sudden you're in that other character's head and you want to recognize that character but also make them different to how this other person views them. And it was just like, yeah, the hardest part of it, I think, was in making each of the characters feel like they were real people and not just like devices. So make them, give them enough of their own voice that you could tell that they were their own person, and even though they all belong to this one story. So that but that was part of the fun, because it was I learned so much about characters from this book. But Kirk, I think, is probably my favorite. I could have just written the whole thing just in Kirk's voice and just laughed the entire time. I really liked his character. He's very, very sarcastic and dour about everything, and he was a joy to write. Like, yeah, I can't remember reading a character who is like really just miserable about being like one of the first people on another planet, like just because that's just him, you know. But like Kirk he was just like he was just like, oh well, it's just a different planet, guys, come on. It's like, and I really liked his voice for that. It was fun.
Definitely. I think one of the things I also loved the book was how different each voice was, and they really feel like their own individual characters. So absolutely job well done on that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Did you have a favorite one of them that like you enjoyed the most?
I feel like Kirk was also my favorite because he was the most memorable one.
Yeah.
I mean, like all of them were memorable, but Kirk was like, the standout.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like, I like the fact that he's like early on in the book as well, because like I feel if I'd have put him later, then he would have just like, you wouldn't have remembered anybody before Kirk. It's like it's good that he was at the start. But yeah, it's yeah, I'm glad you like him. He was my favorite too, my secret favorite. But then like I really liked how like in Penelope's chapter, how that is kind of like, that to me felt like the most complete character that I wrote. So yeah, it's a really strange. I like them all for different reasons, but whoever reads the book will have to we'll have to sort of have let me know who's your favorite, if you agree with me and if you like Kirk as well.
Well, it seems like we have another audience question if you want to answer that one before my next one.
Oh yeah, so this is Raf asking. So I think Raf is, so he says, what interests you about fungus? Do you think humanity will have a more negative experience with fungi? And I think this is because earlier I tweeted about Adrian's book, so Mushroom Blues, I think. I don't even know if that's the title, if that's been released or not. I'm not sure if it has. But anyway, I've just realized I have no idea if that's been released or not, or it's going out live. Sorry, Adrian, if that's a big spoiler. But anyway, Adrian has this book that's coming out, which is all about mushrooms, and it's going to be absolutely amazing. He's told me some bits and pieces about it, and it is just I'm so excited about it. Adrian M. Gibson, he's the host of the SFF Addicts podcast, and he is just absolutely amazing guy. So I tweeted earlier about Adrian's book, and he has the greatest obsession with fungus of anybody that I know. He is just like, when you see some of the things that he's concocted and that he's come up with for how to fuse like sci-fi and mushrooms, they are just, it's going to blow everybody away. So for me, I like fungus. Fungus is great, but I am not the expert on it. That definitely belongs to Adrian. And I think that fungus, my least favorite fungus is probably the stuff you get between your toes. My most favorite fungus is the pretty mushrooms on trees. That's my take on it. And I think the more that we can focus on the pretty mushrooms on trees, the better our experience with fungus will be. So, I hope that answers your question, Raf. But yeah, mushrooms rock. They just do.
I like that answer.
Thank you.
So my next question for you, it will be one of the big ones. What do you predict for the future of humanity, and what are your hopes for it if different from your predictions?
These questions are amazing. Like, that's, yeah. So the future of humanity. Wow. Okay. So the thing about the book is it all works on spirals and it all works on loops, right? So the I think that the idea of the future is that we seem to be, even though we are progressing in lots of different ways as a species, we're also circling around a lot of the same things, and a lot of the same issues that we always have done. And so for me, I kind of feel like, um, the future of humanity is very much rooted in how, whether we're able to resolve those issues or not. Because I think until that happens, we will just keep spinning around them, and things will just get increasingly more crazy, because earlier, the more that we learn, the more people are putting that to use in destructive ways. Mm-hmm. So, in terms of the way that where the world is heading, I think it's heading towards not great things. But my hope is that a resolution to some of these things comes, and whatever that resolution is, whether that's from a human source or not, or whether that is from wherever that resolution arises from, I think that will be the thing that sort of takes us into our next phase. I think that will be the thing that sort of elevates us, and that sort of lifts us out of the spirals that we're stuck in at the minute. So for me, I haven't got any kind of like predictions like, oh, we're gonna get hover cars, or oh, we're gonna be sort of living in sort of metal boxes, that kind of thing. But for me, I feel like, on a more general kind of way, I feel like we need to find a way to resolve, rather than just keep circling. And once we do that, good things will come. That's my hope.
I hope so too. Especially with everything going on in the world right now. But I do feel like people, or at least I hope people, are getting more empathetic, or slowly getting there.
Yeah, I feel like so a lot. It was interesting. I was talking about this with somebody earlier, and about how we live in unprecedented times, but at the same time, like, all of the headlines, if you just took the basics of the headlines, they're things that I remember from when I was young. I remember there being sort of, all of these things that we're seeing on the news. I remember there being the same headlines in like the 90s and the early 2000s. And it just seems as though, sort of, if you were to take the specifics out of it, it just seems as though we're stuck on the loop. But I do feel as though people are becoming more aware of that, and I think that is creating this kind of like need in people to be able to sort of to move the conversation on. And I think that is a really, really good place for people to be, because they don't want to just circle around the same things. They want to find out a better way of doing things. And I think that opens the way for a different type of conversation, which is, and I think that's one that is very much tied to empathy, and to learning that we're all in it together. And that's very much that's very much something that I am hopeful towards, that more people just become more open-minded to more types of conversations, and that we listen as much as we wish to speak, because it's a strange thing, isn't it, being a writer, because you feel as though you've got to develop a voice, but you don't really have anything to say until you've listened very, very, very hard. And so I kind of feel like your listening skills need to be greater than your speaking skills. So I kind of feel like we kind of have to set the lead with that. And one of the things I enjoy about being a writer is being able to contribute to that, and to throw things out there and get people thinking and get people talking and getting people having conversations that are a little bit different, and that might open their minds to new ideas. And I think that's a really powerful thing, because that's kind of like, it's kind of like spreading empathy, and that's what SFF is so good at, isn't it, as a genre?
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking about this too, in terms of social media, the internet, things like that. in activism and accessibility. And it seems like it is much easier to be able to access information, be able to kind of rally people together and actually speak out about certain issues and try to find solutions because we are able to connect at like a more global range type of thing with social media. But at the same time, because it is not as regulated, you know, compared to before where we have the news. But even then, that can be tempered with and things like that. There could be a lot of misinformation or people attacking others because they're hiding behind a screen and things like that. So I do hope that, you know, with increase in like communication accessibility, we are able to kind of use it for the better rather than for the worse. But I do think people are becoming more and more conscious about what they do and don't say online and how it can impact others offline. So hopefully, positive trajectories only.
Yeah, that's what we want. We want the positives. But I think that's the thing about social media is that it's so this is what I was maybe intending to say, but maybe didn't say very well, is that I think it used to be very much a case whereby we were using it as a platform to say things. And now it seems like it's very much a platform to connect with people. And that to me, the shift there is very, very subtle, but it's very important. Because if we only view it as a platform on which to speak, then there's only a certain limit as to what we can learn from one another. But if you're using it as a way to connect with people, then you are using it in a way to be able to, that is much more productive globally. It has is much better positive outcomes. So I think that's an important role for social media, is the connectivity. But again, it's like that's an interesting thing that the book explores, because part of the book is this colony and this other exoplanet, and they are kind of cut off from communication with Houston, you know. So it's like what do they do about, you know, they're so disconnected. It's like how does that affect them and their mission and things. And there's elements like that. Like there's a character in there who is desperate, just wants to have that connection back home, and is just always like it's like the driving force of that character is just need that. And it's almost like it becomes that person, you know. But yeah, people need to have that connection. Humans need to be connected. That's ultimately like that. We are social beings, are we? So we need that, but we thrive when that connection is made.
For sure. All right, so we have another audience question before my last question. So if you want to put that one up.
Here we go.
Yes. So what time travel stories influence Time Ellipse?
I love time travel stories, Raf. I think they're awesome. I I think that the time travel stories that influenced it the most are ones that play around not so much with time travel, but more with like the fringes of time travel. So I mentioned earlier about Interstellar as being like a comparison title, and that's a story that doesn't necessarily involve time travel, but involves like time shenanigans. And there's very much that type of vibe with Times Ellipse, is that you won't get characters traveling backward and forward in time, but you will get things happening with time that aren't normal. And I think that there's a lot of stories that do that really, really well. In terms of books, I think I kind of think that my love of short stories is kind of present in this book, because I love stories that you can read and that kind of give you like something that feels complete, but in very few words. I really admire the writers that do that really well. And so I kind of wanted the book to have that kind of like episodic feel to it, where you felt as though each section felt complete in itself, but it was contributing to a larger whole. So anthologies do that brilliantly. They take a concept and they explore it from loads of different angles, and I kind of wanted this book to have that aspect to it too. So just think about the best anthologies you can think of, you know, like a Philip K. Dick anthology, or like a book of, you know, I will be able to tell you loads of different anthologies because she's been in so many of them that are just like really, really cool to, you know, just take a concept and just look at it from different lenses. Any book like that has been an influence for Times Ellipse. So yeah, I wish I had like a list of like specific ones. I should probably think of them, but yeah, there's authors like the stuff that I does, because I love I stories, stuff that like what authors like Pung Shepherd, what they do with their stories, I love that. So yeah, it's that kind of writing that really like, yeah, is my inspiration for stuff, when it comes to style and tone and that kind of thing.
All right. So I have one more question for you, which is, what are you working on next?
Yeah, so many things. I have like, I have a few projects lined up. I'm going to be writing another book, doing some more short story stuff. I'm going to be doing, hopefully in the future, maybe some audio drama stuff. I've got a little bit of, I've got a few projects sort of penciled in for like, which are collaboration projects with different ones, and I'm really, really looking forward to that. So yeah, I've got there's some good stuff in the pipeline. My next book is one that I'm currently maybe about 20,000 words through the first draft. And it's one that it's been on my brain for too long, and it just needs to get out there. So I'm hoping to get that sort of polished off, sort of in the early part of next year. But that's like a multiverse book, which is, yeah, my take on that. So yeah, so we'll just see what the future holds. But I definitely want to keep exploring stories that are familiar but different. So yeah, that's and ones with concepts that are a little bit like, you hear it and you think, what, like, is that gonna work? Those, I like writing those kinds of books.
Yeah.
What are you writing next, Ai? That's what I want to know.
Oh, also too many things. But my latest one is kind of like, I have two books that I want to work on that is companions to Linghun in a way, but two very, very different books. One is kind of like based on fate and reincarnation, and kind of Inception-esque. And then the other one is a Mulan horror about childhood and death.
I love it. A Mulan horror. Yes. Because like, because that's the thing, Mulan doesn't have enough, right? It's like, it needs to be, it needs more horror. It needs more, right? It's like, that would be so good.
But yeah,
That sounds really exciting. Those projects,
I am very excited to write them. But is there anything else you wanted to talk about specifically in regards to the book, or what you wanted to say about the book?
All I was thinking of is maybe doing a little bit of a reading, maybe,
Yes.
like from a section, and then, because it gives people an idea as to the kind of thing that the book is like. But yeah, basically, it's out from, well, if you're in Australia, it's out now. Basically, it will be out as soon as it hits midnight wherever you are. Then it will. So December 12th is the official release date, but the paperback is out now. So you can get the paperback on Amazon right from now, but the ebook will be available at midnight. You can pre-order it. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I quite fancy reading it, and you want the ebook, just pre-order it, and when you wake up, it'll be on your device. So and that's, yeah. So it's kind of like, but in Australia, if you're listening to this and you're watching it in that part of the world, then just go for it. If it's like 3 o'clock in the morning where you are and you're like, I need to buy a book, then this is the one to buy. So yeah. But yeah, it's available on Amazon. Yeah. So shall I read a snippet?
Yes, please do.
So I was thinking which snippet to read, because like the beginning kind of gives you a little bit as like the climate crisis that's like exists in the story, that it's kind of like circles around. But then I was like, I've put the beginning like out in different things before, and like interviews I've done and stuff, so why not just pick a different part of the book? So I was going to read a chapter. This is Harold's perspective, and I just thought this was like a nice short little chapter that's like about that far through the book. So it's not too far in. Hopefully it won't contain too many spoilers. So yeah, this is Harold. Dawn was hard to come by on a planet that never spun. My first glimpse of the sun the day we arrived on Trappist-1E would likely be the final dawn I'd ever lived to see. If that turned out to be true, it was worth it. Every day of my life on Earth was a day I spent in the stars. That's what it meant to be an astrophysicist, but until we landed here, I'd never been anywhere close to a real star. The sun wasn't exactly close to Earth. It was more like a bulb than a star. Sure, I'd curated enough planetariums to stand side by side with any gas giant I cared to load into the projector. Simulations, virtual reality. But it was also distant, like a picture behind a glass frame. No matter how close I got, there was always a barrier between me and the canvas. However hard I stared, I'd never see it for what it truly was. I'd only ever experienced it from the other side, the far side. Not like Trappist-1E. Here, I could look at the sun with my own eyes. My own eyes. I didn't need a telescope or an instrument to mediate. No translation required in this conversation. It was just me and the star, a crimson flame flickering in heaven's hearth. From the moment I raised my head to gaze at that red sun, the gloves had been ripped off. I touched the universe for the first time, and it felt, how can I put it? It was like that moment when winter was replaced by the first glimpse of spring. Dew trapped on snowdrops, frost banished, except the moment didn't pass. I'd been reborn in perpetual springtime. The light was like water, gushing from a fountain, bathing us clean. Life. Trappist is life. Are you all right? June wrapped her hand around my arm. Sorry, darling. Was I mumbling again? You always get so lost when you're stargazing. I shrugged. Occupational hazard. She nuzzled her head on my shoulder. Her blonde hair whispered on my neck. Tell me what you see. Same as you, darling. All I see is the sky. I know. Amazing, isn't it? She scowled. Well, it's big, I'll give you that. Naturally. It's just so... She shrugged. So what? So empty. I laughed. Empty? That's a good one. I'll have to remember that. What's funny? Look again, I said. Only a little harder. The sky isn't empty, June. It's full. Yeah, right. Full of dead rocks zipping around space, maybe. I shook my head. The sky is the most living thing there is, darling. Think of how it moves. Graceful yet powerful. Like a ballet dancer with sledgehammers for legs and a butterfly's finesse. It never stops growing, expanding with every second that ticks by, giving birth to countless new stars. Have you ever known something to reproduce so voraciously? It feeds, it opens its many mouths, and gigantic black holes consume everything they touch. It speaks in waves and radiation that flood it like a cosmic reservoir. And it breathes. Give me your hand. Can you feel it breathing on your skin? You're crazy, Harold. You know that? Is that your official diagnosis, Doctor? I'm afraid so. I'll get Max to send off my report. Dr. Harold Wang, rotten fruitcake fit for the loony bin. Takes one to know one. Hey, she punched my arm, playful but firm. Those skinny limbs didn't half pack a wallop. All right, I lifted my hands to surrender. I give up. I'm sorry. She folded her arms and smirked. That's more like it. Trust you to call me crazy and then have me apologize for it. See? I told you. You're nuts. But that's why you love me, right? You just can't get enough of this wacko nut job and his crazy sky talk. Occupational hazard. She clasped my hand and wove her fingers through mine. We sat in silence, staring at the sun, the star, the dim light that swathed us in its majesty, with June in my arms and the heavens in full bloom. Maybe the next few thousand years might not be so bad. If Kirk was right, of course. And why wouldn't he be? The sky didn't lie. I trusted it. Ever since we'd landed, that trust only deepened. On Earth, the horizon had been the barrier between man and what lay above. We could never fully give ourselves over to it, always tied to the ground. Not so here. On Trappist 1E, there was no seam. I reached out and embraced the universe, and every time I delved further into the expanse, the exhilaration tingled sharper. Pins and needles. I was alive, connected to everything at once, to June, to the stars. My lungs filled with the breath of untold eons. I could taste the millennia that awaited us, and it tickled my tongue. Everywhere I looked, there was life. So much of it, and more beauty than 1,000 sunrises. I guess it was a fair trade. If we were going to be stuck circling the same view of the heavens for the next few centuries, the view might as well be this one. I think you're wrong about the sky, June said, snapping me out of myself again. She turned her neck and gazed at me with those intent blue eyes. Really, darling? What bit did I get wrong? The part about it being the most living thing in the universe. She dragged my hand to her belly and pushed my palm on her stomach. You don't mean, Harold, I'm pregnant. What do you know? Another dawn. And that was Harold.
Yay! What a wonderful reading. And we have praise in the comments too.
Thanks, Raph. Thanks, Ai. Yeah. So Times Ellipse, it's basically it's more of that but different.
There are a lot of different stories within the story. It's kind of like nested stories in a way, but not really, but yes.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. It's funny, Harold was like a really late addition to it. But yeah, but I do kind of like him. I think he's a good guy. But yeah. I like as well because like the story, some of them are real long and some of them are just a little short. It's nice having a little short one. It's like it breathes a little bit because yeah. But yeah, it's fun. I hope everybody else enjoys it.
I'm sure they will.
So yeah, thank you for joining me. Thank you, and thank you for everybody who's tuned in and who's gotten this far and stayed with us and everything. I hope you found it interesting and fun, and it kind of gives you an idea as to what to expect about the book. You know, it's something that will hopefully make you think, make you feel, and be worth your time. So yeah, thank you for sharing this time with me. It's been really fun. And your questions are amazing. You should do in professional interviews because they're just like they're awesome.
Maybe eventually I will do some of those on my website, populate it with author interviews, but we shall see. I feel like I'm always adding more things onto my plate when I really shouldn't be, but
it seems like every time that I talk to you, there's more and more and more on the like you've got so many ideas. It's just like, yeah, it's amazing. I don't know how you find the time. It's yeah. You must have a time anomaly where you live to actually sort of get it all done. It's amazing.
I mean, I try to make time anomalies, but my body knows. It knows I cannot cheat it.
Yeah, but thank you for joining me, and yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. It's been really good.
Thanks for having me. Thank you everyone for coming, and buy Fraser's book.
Thank you. Bye.